Welcome back to the Infinite Creators podcast. A man by the name of Orann Coyle is on this week. Orann works in financial wealth management, and it's kind of a conversation that I was a little unsure about, because, I don't want to be talking about money, but then I'm like, money also is something that we need to live in this world, and a lot of people struggle with it, and I thought it would be worth having a conversation to give people an insight to how they can become financially secure, stable, how they can put their money into investments where their money's working for them, as opposed to always living week to week. And you don't have to be earning loads of money, and we're going to just go through a few different examples of, earning low income, if you want to call it for better words, or the average income, and given examples of how you can put your money into a saving for a property or investing or whatever it is. And I really feel that that's an important topic, and so I hope you enjoy the conversation. And if you are, please press subscribe and you'll get all the notifications for each release. Enjoy. Orann Coyle, welcome to the Infinite Creators podcast. How's things with you?
Cheers, Ryan. Things are great, actually. Friday, another weekend coming up.
How's your week going now?
Week went well, right? I'm just back from my holidays, stuck back into work, tidying a few things up as usual. Looking forward to seeing out the year on a high. What about yourself?
Just coming through the summer, although we didn't have much of it, and just enjoying being busy, but also just trying to stay balanced as well. Sometimes I try to do a lot, when I don't need to, but enjoying it too, enjoying being creative. But I'm really interested in having this conversation with you today, and talking about money, wealth, abundance, and something that you've really gone down the road of and trying to help others. But before we get to talking about how you help people, become financially secure, stable, wealthy, abundant, I want to start by asking, where did it all start for you? When was it that you're younger that I suppose that you wanted to say, look, I want to be abundant and I want to be wealthy and I want to be secure,
I suppose dialing it or trying to nail that down to one thing is quite hard. I suppose environments become, a major part in that. And I suppose whenever I was younger, I definitely had a sense that I always had a big vision or big, the space around me was big instead of small, and I had a big mind and an open mind. And I suppose whenever I was younger, coming back to that, I always had a feeling that I wanted to do something that involved money, which sounds superficial, but in some ways it always intrigued me. And in a sense that, with power comes freedom, with freedom comes choices and flexibility and less stress and all those sorts of things. And obviously, as a child, I wasn't a child at that point. That was, sort of creeping into my teenage years. And actually coming to me now specifically, I remember there was one person in our school who was a careers teacher, and he was very ruthless in the way that he thought about things. And I remember he was a careers teacher, but he also taught us biology. And one day we were in class, I think it was fourth year, so that's what, 14, 15. And somebody was messing around, and he said to them, if you don't stop messing around in this classroom, you're not going to get the grade that you need in this class. You're not going to get into the university that you want to get into, and you're not going to be able to do X, Y, and Z with your life. And that started to really ping, the spidey senses went off, and I thought, when it comes to things like this, you have to be thinking about it early, and you have to immerse yourself in it in some way or form. And so from whenever I was about 14 or 15, that's when this all started. And as I say, environments, played a part in that. And I was always taught that have an open mind and think big, because thinking small, isn't going to get you anywhere. And in a sense, they think big, think bigger and bigger and bigger. But if you think much bigger than you're thinking now, then even if you fall short of that, you're going to end up somewhere all right. Are you with me?
Yeah.
And so, at that point then I started to, get those feelings about money and watching things to do with banking and investing and all these types of things. And that's what sort of propelled me into thinking about that more. And obviously, coming from a good environment and a comfortable environment where I was always supported, that's where it all started.
Yeah. And did you go to college and to study that, or what did it lead to?
In terms of what I ended up delving into, so obviously I was at school through sixth form, and then I actually wanted to go to Belfast to do a degree in accountancy or banking or something, or finance it actually was at the time, excuse me. But through that period of time, I decided to go to England. So I applied for universities all around England, and at the time my older brother, one of my brothers, was in Liverpool. And so I decided, from a comfort aspect, just from going away and experiencing new things, that it would be good to go to England. And so I'd done an undergraduate degree in accountancy with business management, which was sort of a very broad Bachelor of Arts. It wasn't even a Bachelor of Science, so it was quite practical. And by the time I came out of that, we had sort of, exemptions to become like part qualified accountants per se. And when I finished that degree, I decided that I wasn't ready to be an accountant, or nor did I want to be one, to be honest with you. And so I thought, what's the next step? And at the time, when you're young and you think, well, I'm going to get a degree and I'm going to bag, the unicorn jobs, as I like to call them, the best job out there, and I'll be laughing for the rest of my life, which unfortunately for a lot of people is just not the case, and I was the same. And so I decided, what can I do that will, help differentiate me from other candidates who are going for certain types of jobs if I ever had to compete with them, which ultimately I never had to, just because of the way my career panned out. But I ended up doing a master's degree in risk analysis and investment management at Queen's, which was much more in line with what I wanted to do professionally. That could lead to compliance work or risk management work or working in banking and all that sort of stuff. And that's essentially what ended up putting me in front of my employer at that point, who decided that, because I had all these qualifications at 21, that I was going to be somewhat, applicable and be able to transfer what I've learned to the wealth management industry. And then the rest happened, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's a strange thing, university, because coming from a grammar school, we're always taught STEM subjects, do the STEM thing, do the normal thing that everybody else does, look into becoming a doctor or accountant or solicitor and whatever. And that was just natural whenever you're, somebody who performs well, with your grades. And obviously, as I said, I always had an interest in money, and I thought, well, maybe I should go down the line of accountancy or finance, and that might give me the fuzz. That's what I like to call it, something that is going to give me the fuzz, but like James May from Top Gear. And so I settled on accountancy, but by the time I came to the end of it, I knew that it wasn't what I was looking for to give me the fuzz, the satisfaction that what I'm doing, I really want to do it. Because nowadays, and you probably know this yourself, is doing a degree has its pros and its cons in terms of the financial burden that it puts on people, but also it can be a big up when you get a degree, but when you get to the end of it and you decide, was that really the right thing for me, or did I just do it for doing sake? And I suppose at the time I just had to leverage it. Thank God I done it. It benefits me really well now in the line of work that I'm in. And I knew it was a secure thing to do, to become an accountant. I knew it was secure, but it never, struck me as a job that was like, you're an accountant, you get some level of fulfillment or satisfaction from that. And so that led me on to, doing further education. And I'm still getting educated now, 10 years later. I've never stopped educating myself. I actually done an exam last week to get to the next level, and in terms of the qualifications that I can get as a financial planner. So, it's an interesting route. But as I say, if you want to delve a bit deeper into it, financial planners don't need degrees. You can come straight out of school and do the diploma in financial planning or regulated financial planning, which is the minimum qualification that you need to become a financial planner. Which I didn't know, and it's an industry that was never really widely talked about. So the degrees that I did have benefited me very well in applying things that I've learned to my career. But at the time I was thinking, is this the right move? Should I have done something different? When I had an interest in a lot of things, architecture was one that I was really interested in, and international business was another thing, which is completely on a different road. So I settled on that anyway, and it's brought me to where I am. So, touch wood that it's been good for me now, and it will continue to be good for me. Um, and that's it. That's it on that journey. I could give you a lot more stories about it, but that's the overview.
Yeah, yeah. And your feeling then around money, what is it? How do you feel or think about money? Because I think a lot of the time it can be a mindset.
Of course. When you're younger, everybody experiences the glamour and the pull of being rich. When people are attracted to being rich because you can have whatever you want and you can do whatever you want and it looks good. Which obviously that's my feelings about that have changed over time, and how I actually view wealth and what that actually means. Because perception has become a big thing, and assumptions. People make a lot of assumptions about people with wealth, in terms of they don't have any stress or there's nothing that worries them, or as it's their life has no issues, and that's not entirely true, as people know as they get older. And with the saying, more money, more problems, that is true. You see people, albeit their first world problems, not to offend anybody, but it comes along with a certain type of responsibility. And so when you're younger, you go from this, look at this person, look at that person, they've got this and that, and I'd like to replicate that, I'd like to step into that. And so your perception is much more superficial when you're younger. But as you get older and you get exposed to people with wealth, or people accumulating wealth, or providing people a chance to get wealthy, like I do for a living, it's your perception becomes much more about freedom of choice, and the perception of not having to rely on anybody, relying on yourself, being able to provide for people. And so it becomes much less selfish in a way. That's the way that I see it. Anybody that I've ever seen that's accumulated wealth in a sizable fashion has spent most of their time using it to benefit other people. And they're able to do that because they're savvy with the way that they manage their wealth. And so it's an interesting one, because as I say, my perception changed when I was younger, and you get to a point where you start to think, how long is a piece of string in terms of how long money will make you happy. Because everybody can look online and see that there's a lot of people out there, and that's a hot topic in terms of, does money really make you happy? And so my perception has changed from when I was younger, to money being a much more glamorous thing, to now it's evolved to be much more of a tool for doing different things with your life, or having the freedom to do that. And that actually, my perception of it has become much smaller in terms of the wealth that you need to be able to feel like that. No, I consider it to be something that affects your feelings. And everybody thinks, I need to be worth 10 million quid to live a good lifestyle, or to be comfortable with my life and not have any problems. It's not the case. It's not. I've seen it and I've dealt with it. And that point, that level, or that shelf that you have to reach, is much, much smaller than that. And it boils down to both how much wealth you have and ultimately how much money you earn. But the major thing is how much you spend and how much you use it. Are you using it for short-term gratification, or are you using it for long-term gratification, or are you mixing it between the two? And so, to answer your original question, things have changed. My perception of money has changed from something that can give you comfort, but it's not the be-all and end-all, which it can seem when you're younger. And the fact that it's helped me change my mindset to see a different side of how money works and how the world works. Because at some point it becomes irrelevant, how many zeros is enough. And that's, look at somebody like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or whoever you want to look at. They're in a position where they have all the money in the world, but what sort of utility does that provide them? That's the way I think about it now. That's a good word, utility. What do you need to provide you the utility that you want with your life, and how you feel about it? And then after that, are you just trapped in the box? Are you just doing it for the sake of doing it? And that's something that's changed massively for me, even over the last couple of years. From just the thought about having money isn't really what you should be thinking about. If you chase it, you'll never get it. But if you set yourself up in a way and think in a certain way and believe that you're going to be able to put yourself in that position, that it will come to you.
Yeah, and that's what I want to dive into, is like how you help people and how you can guide them on the way to becoming abundant, bringing in money because again, it's definitely a lot to do with mindset, but how people can start, because some people might be earning, depending on what you're earning is, I suppose, is where you start, but I'm sure there's people who earn a significant amount too and who still can't mind the money, or they're just not able to hold on to it, so if you were to start with someone new now who wanted to start saving money, or at least wanted to start moving towards becoming stable, financially secure, or building security for the future, who were maybe earning maybe 20,000, 25,000 a year, full time, how do you guide that person to becoming, or like how do you plan for the future? Where does it start for them?
Well, I suppose it's subjective. It depending on people's lifestyles and the lifestyle that they want to have. Do they have children? Are they married? All these other softer facts that come into people's lives. But the general rule of thumb that I've started playing around with is what I call the 5 pillars of wealth or security, which is saving money, investing money, paying into pensions for your long-term savings, investing in things like property, owning a home, and the security that comes with that, and insurance, right? And so whenever people first come to somebody like me, there's 2 sides of it. It's about your financial circumstances and how to better manage them. And then the other side is a mindset thing. And they go hand in hand, but I'll try and discuss them separately and then we'll tie them together. And so the average person who earns, the average amount of money that people earn in the UK, which is between 25 and 30 grand a year, they get the level of security. They need basically 2 things in their life, which is semi-control of their living circumstances, where they may have ownership of a property that's, if anything happens, that they're never going to get kicked out of it. So that's a real comfort level for a lot of people, especially in our society. In places like America, home ownership isn't as big of a deal. What people are renting and things like that. But that's having your own home is the main thing, and that's what generally people in our culture will aim towards whenever they first start out in a career. Is I live at home. The first thing that I should really be doing is getting out on my own and building my own security. But before that, you have to be managing your finances themselves quite strictly, which is the amount of money you earn, the amount of money you spend, and your disposable income. And disposable income becomes a major factor because, as we've talked about before, you can earn a lot of money and you can also spend a lot of money. So if you earn 100 and spend 100, it makes no difference if somebody earns 40 and spends 40. What you're spending it on might be at a higher scale, but ultimately you're still 0-1 out every time. And then what my goals are for new people that I meet is figure out what you're earning and what you're spending and how you can create a gap between those 2. That's the first thing, because you can't save money if you don't have disposable income. You with me? And so after that, it's create some disposable income, which could be as simple as cancelling direct debits that you're just spending money on that you don't need, subscriptions for things that you don't watch, gym memberships that you don't use, and things like that. And that can create disposable income. And then you have to move that disposable income and deploy it and the things like savings for emergency funds, which is getting yourself to a point where you have enough money to string you out for a certain period of time if something goes wrong in your life, which could be if you lose your job or if a major expenditure comes up in your home or with a vehicle. So the first thing is getting people to a point where they understand that they need to have that buffer behind them to protect themselves. That's the very first thing, which is specifically 3 to 6 months of your expenditure plus another maybe £1,000 for unplanned expenditure. So somebody who earns 25 grand a year, for example, and their expenditure every month is £1,000, if we keep it simple. If you take 3 months of that expense, add £1,000 on, that means that you really should be sitting on 4 grand to protect yourself, not for anybody else's benefit other than your own. So that if something goes wrong in your life, that you have that behind you to protect you. Give you, for example, if you lose your job, you've got 2 or 3 months of bills and stuff that you can pay for before you need to find another job. So it gives you time, right? And then after that is, once you get to that point where you've got the utility from those emergency funds as they're pegged, is what do you then do with money? And so obviously if somebody has a career and they're working for an employer, they're probably paying into a workplace pension. And a major thing that I want to touch on right now is if anybody has ever left a workplace pension, they need to get back into it, because it's going to do serious damage to their future, right? But coming back to it, any more disposable income you have, then you should be thinking about, what can I do so I can move towards in the future, or foresee a period of time where I am no longer trading my time for money, i.e. an hourly wage, and where I have things that are going to make money for me while I'm not doing anything for it. So for the average person, it will be, they lay it out in bullet point form. Figure out where you are. Like, there's a lot of people out there that, you know, that don't have any idea of what they're spending. So it's figure out where you are, figure out what your income and expenditure is. Avoid consumer debt. You know, you don't want to be carrying a lot of consumer debt unless it's useful. You know, credit card debt and things like that. Build up emergency funds. And then after that, you get to the point where somebody like me will say, maybe now is time to start deploying your money where it can have a chance to grow in the future. And as we talked about before, maybe not everybody's in that position. They commit, you know, a lot of money to these things, or even a £200 a month or £300 a month or whatever. And so now, today, there's never been a time where accessing investments and things like that has been more accessible, because you can do this online yourself from £1 a month or a £5 a month. And that might sound insignificant to one person, but you're starting to snowball, and that's what really matters. Do you have any questions on that?
No, but the one thing that was crossing my mind is this something that someone could come to you about who isn't, because let's say they don't have enough money to work with a financial planner, but that's something that they can still come to you about, and you 100%. Will guide them on that road.
Yes,
just 100%. getting them to that place where they've never been, and you can continue guiding them.
Of course I can, yeah, of course. And that's, you know, that's why I've put myself out there on social media as a way, because at the end of the day, a lot of people are intimidated. They talk about certain things, and you know, Irish culture, money has always been, you know, something that people are closed books about. And so it's a matter of giving people information that they can start to apply to themselves. And then when they feel more comfortable, they can come along and say, I've seen that you've provided information on X, Y, or Z, but I want to learn more and I want to take it serious. So yes, I can help them. And that might be indirectly online, as I said, or they can come and see me. And the benefits of somebody like me is that, as you know, as I said before, we don't charge people to come and see us. And the way that I see it is give and receive. You know, I do my best to provide time for people who, you know, I know that aren't quite there yet, but they need help to get them there. Because, you know, if you put yourself in my position, if I put a barrier up in front of somebody from getting to that point, then, you know, everything I'm doing is I'm only serving the people who, or, you know, I know need served, instead of trying to help people raise the quality of what they're trying to do with their own finances. Mm-hmm. And so to answer your question, yes, I'm willing to speak to anybody, even if it's a 20-minute phone call at 8 o'clock at night. I've done it, I've been there, and I still do it. And I'm willing to do that if people want guidance. And that's what you're talking about, is guidance.
Yeah.
And, you know, alongside that, I don't, you know, keep all this within my own boundaries and my own remit. You know, I know people who are money coaches and people who put out information that's more in line with budgeting. You know, I might be putting out more technical information, but they might be putting out things that are much more applicable to day-to-day life, especially if you have children and all that stuff. And I say, well, go and look at this person's information and they'll be able to help you, and then we can discuss it, no problem. And so the answer is yes. The answer is yes, I'm willing to help. And that's me starting to get the mindset going too, of taking control of your finances. Because most people are riding around and their money runs their life, whenever it should be the other way around, you know?
Yeah. A lot of people do live week to week. Is there an element of sacrifice required to get to that place?
1,000%. You know, at the end of the day, it's as they say, short-term and long-term gratification. And that's where the mindset side starts to trickle in, is because, you know, like anything else, if you want to get in better shape, you know, you're going to have to sacrifice the things that you like eating in some way or form. not completely, but you're going to have to cut back on them. And that's no different than managing your finances. You have to understand that giving up something or a small part of what you earn now will provide you with tenfold utility or satisfaction in the future. And I see that day in and day out, and I see the people who have put themselves in that position where they have thought about that and they have done that over a period of 20 or 30 years. And I've seen the other side of it too, when there's people that are 60 years old and they've got nothing. They might have a home, but they don't have a large pension that's going to sustain them. They don't have savings for protection, and so they're at risk. And that's what this is all about. It's about reducing risk in your life. And so, I do think that, there is a place for it, and the mindset of it is that you need to understand that you have to give up something or a small part of it now in order to receive the benefits in the future. And then that's when we see people with certain amounts of wealth versus people with a lot more wealth, is because that's all relative to what they've sacrificed. And that's something that the UK is really getting behind now. Obviously we're in a period of time where that's very difficult too because of the cost of living, and so you're then having to add that additional layer and the mindset and framing and helping people see the different perspectives, because people are already struggling, and then you're saying to them, well, you should be taking a wee slice off and trying to put that away for your own benefit in the future, which can be difficult. And so it's one of them things where in the long run, I always say to people, you don't have to do this day in and day out and day in and day out for your whole life. You will have periods of time where you're able to commit more or less to your long-term future. For example, when you're younger and you're working and you've got no commitments. But when you have children or you have debt on property or whatever, you don't have as much free reign as whenever you didn't have children, because there's costs associated with that. And so it's a juggling act. It's always a juggling act. But that the main thing is about getting in that frame of mind that you have to sacrifice, because it's all about you. You have to be selfish yourself, and that's what a lot of people don't understand. You have to look after number one in a way. Without it sounding narcissistic, you have to protect yourself so that you can then protect other people in the future.
Yeah. It was running my mind there, like whenever I started out working, and I always made a commitment to saving a certain amount every single week, and it was just about being consistent. And I would never fail to make sure that I put that, it was like automatic direct debit into another account. And then every year as I earned more, I started putting more in, and then that just progressed over the years, and then you start putting more and more away. So for me, it's just about consistency, and it's committing to that and not letting that slide. And whenever you do that, then it starts to become, things start going your way, And I think if people can do that, just make the commitment, even if it's just a tenner a week. It's the practice of doing it.
It is. It's a habit. It's habitual.
Yeah.
Because like anything else, if you go to the gym 5 days a week for 6 months, and then you get to a point where you don't go to the gym, then you feel guilty because you're not going and exercising. And that's the same way saving money or investing money. You will get to a point where once that habit is really formed, if you're not doing it, then you're seeing it as a negative thing, and the longer you go on without putting them habits in place, the harder it gets, because the longer you have had that money in your pocket and you've been using it for your satisfaction, or using it to support yourself or whatever, the harder it gets then they take a slice of that, because you call that lifestyle creep. That's as people earn more money and they spend more money, and then they get to a point where you're asking them to give up some of that, and it's very difficult. And so, like you're saying, if you're consistent, if you create a bottom line whenever you're younger, and that is always there, and then depending on how your life goes then after that, you can adjust, you can increase or decrease depending on what you've got going on in your life, as long as the bottom line's there, which is a foundation. You need a foundation. And I've seen people become much happier knowing that they're doing that, even if it's only smaller amounts of money. Even I always say to somebody, if you're putting away £200 a month, you mightn't feel like that's a significant amount of money that would be significant in your life, because it's a night out or a couple of pairs of shoes. But over 10 years, that's 24 grand. If you've got 24 grand behind you, you know, there's not much that's going to phase you unless there's something catastrophic, you know what I mean? And so that's at that level. And coming back down to the lower level, even if it's a tenner a week, over 10 years, that's 5 grand, which at the end of the day, it's still 5 grand. It's still a lot of money. And so that all depends on what you're looking for, you know, and it depends on your feelings about how you want your life to play out. You know, I've seen people that earn 40 grand a year and end up in a much better position than somebody who earns 100 because of the way they've managed their money.
Alright, so can you give me an example of that? Like,
well, you know, coming back to what we've said, you can earn 40 grand a year and you're disposed, like say when you pay your taxes or whatever, let's keep it simple, you've got 35 grand, right? Or maybe a bit less than that. And out of that 35 grand, you spend 30 grand and then you keep 5. Over 10 years, you've accumulated 50 grand, right? And that could be in a savings account or national insurance or national savings and investment, or a pension or whatever it may be. But then if somebody earns 100 and they end up with 60 grand after they've paid their dues to the man upstairs and all that sort of stuff, and then they spend the 60, 10 years down the line, the lower earners miles ahead. And so, you know, it should be relative to what people earn. There's some people who are very aggressive and thinking about the future, and every pound's a prisoner or every euro's a prisoner. And then there's other people that just don't attach a great deal of value to money. And so there's, you know, you have to find middle ground. I'm not going to tell somebody you can't live your life because you need to save for the future or you need to do this for your benefit. And on the other side, I'm not going to say you should spend all your money because you can't take a wee. All I'm saying is you need to find a middle ground that suits you, because you can't apply the same thing to everyone, Ryan. You just can't, because some people just have different lives, and that's where, coming back to how my perception of money changed, is, you know, my assumptions that I was making about certain types of people when I was younger, in terms of how people should manage their money. But now I've become much more flexible, and you know, I've started to paint a picture in my own head of everybody is different, and that's why my expertise in some way becomes so valuable, because I can see where you have to adapt and be flexible to suit somebody, you know, and that's not easy to do when you're dealing with somebody's finances, because it's not something that they really want to talk about either, you know what I mean? Yeah, and so that example is very common. And look, at the end of the day, there's people that whenever you start involving debt as well, you know, debt is a scary thing if it's not managed well. And generally people who earn less money will be much more aware of debt. But whenever you're earning big money, 6 figures or more, debt doesn't become as much of a problem. But it's not a problem as long as you're earning the money. And then it's what happens after, if something goes wrong and you're not earning that money anymore, then you're starting to see the negative sides of it. So again, there's a lot of subjectivity in it. But, you know, consistency, coming back to consistency and how you manage your money, will always win. Like the tortoise and the hare. The tortoise will always win, over the long run.
Okay, then someone who's starting out, as we talked earlier about, like saying earning 20 to 30 grand, which I think you mentioned is the general average.
UK average is about 27, average. I think 27.
So I would imagine a lot of them people, one of their goals is to buy a property. You know, so let's just say, hypothetically speaking, that's me, and come to you.
Yep.
You give me a plan, a roadmap to buy a property at X amount. Let's just say, what's the average price in Derry at the minute?
Jeez, we'll call it 150 maybe. Okay. That might be a bit higher, to be honest. But
and you probably get ones cheaper too, you know, and it's just like, it's getting on that ladder, you know, because a lot of people could probably like, I want that big house, 300, but it's like, I think it's important to start small, isn't it?
100%.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, one of the things that I've seen is, you know, you have to be comfortable with the decisions that you're making, because even if you're 21 and you're earning a lot of money, taking that step and getting in a commitment like a massive mortgage, it's not easy. You know, I've seen people do it and people carry it well and people don't. But, you know, getting on the ladder in the first place is really the key. And say, coming back to your example, explaining all this with examples is the best way, because I can't give somebody a roadmap until I know what their objective is. And that's something that people misconstrue about financial planning. You know, they think that we have a crystal ball, but our advice is based on people's needs and their wants. So somebody wants to buy a house for 100 grand and they need to save a 15% deposit or a 10% deposit.
Which is 10, 15 grand.
10, 15 grand, right? and they want to buy a house in 3 years. There you go. You've got all your variables. So you need to save 15 grand over 3 years, which is 36 months. Are you saving on your own, or are you saving with a partner? And so if somebody says, "Oh, I'm saving with a partner," or "We're trying to save this amount each," for example, if it's, say they're saving with a partner, they make it easy. So that means two people have to save 7.5 grand each over a 3 year period.
Which is what per year? Less than 2 grand a year.
Right.
Which is
so
what?
probably 2.5 grand a year, which is £190 a month or whatever. My mental maths is
Between them,
not sharp. No, each.
£190 each. So
a month.
Yeah.
Right, and so whenever you
£40 a week or so.
Right, okay, and so somewhere around that anyway. And then it gets to the point where you're like, obviously you're going to have to forecast that maybe the house prices will move around, and that's not just all the money that you need. You might need some money to pay for solicitors and surveys and stuff like that. So in reality, they should be looking for 16 or 17 grand. But whenever you dial back, all we need to save 15 grand to £190 a month, it becomes so much more attainable and less scary. And then you have a plan that somebody can commit to and say, well, I earn 25 grand a year. I have bills of £800 or £900 a month for my car and whatever else I need to pay for, and I pay rent or whatever. That £200 becomes much more manageable and palatable in your life, especially if you're two people earning similar amounts of money. And so that's where the planning comes in. That's where the structure and logic becomes much more valuable than you actually realise. And then people go, my God, I never thought about it that way. And you can apply that to buying a house, buying your second house, buying or getting married, having children, funding university fees for children when they're 18. It all comes back to those variables: time, what you need, and what you earn. And so for that person, that's your plan. And then we will then look at, well, what else is out there to help you with your plan? And so in the UK, you have things like Help to Buy ISAs and Lifetime ISAs, which give you bonuses on what you earn. So for example, a Lifetime ISA, you can put £4,000 on it in a year, and it gives you £1,000 bonus. The government gives you £1,000 for free. And so that's between two people. If they're putting, it's a 25% bonus, or 20% bonus anyway. So if they're saving £2,000 a year, they're going to get £400 for free on top of that. And that means that they might need to save as much or for as long, because they're making use of what's out there for their own benefit. You know what I mean? And then that's where all these plits start to spin, and then it becomes much more attainable. And so coming back to sacrifice, that couple £100 a month, if that's your goal to get to that point, you have to sacrifice something else that money could be swallowed by. And then whenever you reach that goal and you buy the house, then you move on to your next goal and you start off with all the same variables all over again.
But you have so much more behind you this time.
That's what I mean. The way that I consider it is like steps. You have to climb to the first step, and then
which is the hardest one.
Always the hardest one. Always the hardest one, because whether or not, if you get on the ladder, say for example you're buying a home, if you get on the ladder, then if things play out the way history has statistically, if you stay in that house for 5 or 10 years, there's a good chance it might be worth a wee bit more than you paid for it. And so instead of you having to start the process again of saving all this money over a certain period of time, you have now got a buffer. If you sell your house, or if you don't sell your house, you've got equity in it, which then can be used to bolster the next step. And that's that's no different with saving money. You have basically like anything, it's cyclical. So you have a rise, and then you have a fall, and then you have a rise, and then you have a fall, and so on and so forth. And that's the logic that you apply. And see, when you start pinging that at people, they start to understand the value of it. And that's not something that I would charge somebody money for. Mm-hmm. I tell them that on the phone, no bother. And I've done it. I've helped people plan out how they're going to pay for a wedding over 2.5 years. But you need to know those things first. And that's why, I'm sure people who would say, oh, I might buy a house or whatever, but they don't know when, and they don't know why. And then that doesn't become there's not as much conviction there. Whereas if somebody says, I need to buy a house in 3 years, what do I need to do? My partner as well is involved. You can lay that plan out, and they're there. And that's applies to investments too. If somebody wants to accumulate a certain amount of money in savings or investments, the same plan applies. Yeah. And you create those variables yourself based on your needs.
Yeah. So I'm really I'm running through this example as if this is me dealing with
100%,
you,
yeah.
you know. So now me and my partner, we have bought our first house. Three years in, we've done the savings. Now we're earning we're in the 30 to 40k mark.
Yep.
So we're up more money. We're living in our property. Our repayments on the house are a lot less than the rent that I was previously paying. So I'm able to save even more money than I had before.
Okay.
What now, Orann? What's
Right.
next? What
So
else can you offer me?
This is when your web, if you want to call it, of options starts to expand, because you will have the consideration of, will I start paying down my mortgage early? Will I start to concentrate my wealth on the property, i.e. by paying down the mortgage, creating more equity and less debt? But then that comes with its own implications, because you mightn't have as much liquid security. And so that's one of the first considerations, is should I pay my debt off early so that I have less debt in the future, so I'm safer? Or do I start to leverage the free money that I have? I've got some savings behind me. Should I start now investing it? And that can either be in liquid investments that you can access whenever you want, or it can be...
Can you give me an example?
Like a stocks and shares ISA, that would be, which is basically an investment account where you can pay money into it in lump sums or monthly, up to 20 grand a year, and that money will have a chance to grow.
Are these like kind of proven markets, or?
Oh, they're traditional financial markets, yeah. Traditional. That's like, it's a government backed investment product in the UK, and any money that your ISA grows by, for example, is non-taxable. No income tax, no capital gains tax, and so you're then putting yourself in a position where you have an asset that's trying to accumulate money or earn money, but you're holding on to 100% of the gains. The taxman's not handing out, looking for his slice, and then that becomes a bigger snowball, right? And then your other option then is, should I pay more money into a pension for the future, for the long term? And so you start to look at, again, coming back to somebody's objectives. What is their goal? Do they want to become debt free when they're younger? Do they want to accumulate liquid investments in the medium term, which is 5 to 15 years? Or do they want to plan for their longer term first, which is pension age, which is 15 years plus? And so can you see why the options get bigger? Generally, people will be employed. They're already paying money into their pension. Their employer is also paying money into their pension. So in the long run, that will get somebody to a certain level on its own. So they might think, well, my pension planning's sort of okay now, and I've got savings. So you're stuck with, should I pay down debt early, or should I invest money? And that again, and without trying to overcomplicate it, has its own layers, depending on the actual utility you get from paying down a mortgage, depending on your interest rates. If you have a really low interest rate, then there's no point in paying down a mortgage early, because it's taking care of itself. But if you have a very high interest rate, can you save more money by paying down your mortgage early, which in turn will free up more money in the future for you to invest more? Mm-hmm. And so that again comes back to people's needs and their attitude to risk, is what we call it. People who are quite averse to risk want to pay down debt and save money, whereas people who are semi-averse to risk don't want to have a lot of debt, but they want to get their money working in things like stocks and shares ISAs. And then you have people who are incredibly, they run towards risk, and that might include things that are much more aggressive, which will be buying loads of property, accumulating lots of debt, and pumping lots of money into it to grow wealth by gearing debt. But obviously that's things that come, on down the line. But the simple options for somebody in that position, as you've asked, they've bought a house, they're now earning, above the average wage. Your options is pay down debt early, or start to invest in liquid investments that can achieve compound growth, or seek compound growth over a 10 or 15 year period. And that becomes a new circumstance for somebody if they've never been in that position before. And then it's my job to try and frame it for them so they know this is all improving quality of life and improving security and financial stability and all that sort of stuff. And that ties back into those 5 pillars of wealth, as I was talking about at the start. Mm-hmm. And so it's all there's a lot of things going on, and they're all correlated, but it depends on the key factor, which is the person you're dealing with, on how you fit those pieces of the jigsaw together, and that becomes their financial plan. Yeah. So a lot of the people that I would deal with, they get to the point that you're talking about, and then they will start investing money in the markets, which is through things like stocks and shares ISAs, because they're the most tax efficient investment that people can use, that they can access, so that you can access it whenever you want. It's not locked away, and it can be invested in very traditional parts of the market, like stocks or government debt or parts of the UK commercial property market. That they're all done through investment funds, which are essentially big baskets that hold thousands of different things or hundreds of different things. They spread risk, and so there's so many things that they can do, and that's why your own money journey or your own finance journey, your own mindset and your requirements of it is very important. There's people out there that can tell you a one size fits all, this is how you should deal with your money, which is fine, but is that going to suit the way you're trying to live your life?
You talk about risk and risk adverse people, so like there's a lot of people out there who are scared.
Yes.
And I'm going to call it's literally taking that first step because they haven't been taught, they haven't seen it around them, and then there's people who'll run up them steps.
Yep.
Who tends to be, I suppose, the ones, I'm going to call it the winner? Who tends to trump?
Oh my God. Well, you have your stereotypes, right? Not that they're right or wrong, but the stereotypes is that men are much more open to the idea of taking more risk, whereas women historically have been more cautious. And strangely enough, I've been dealing with a lot more women this year, which is brilliant, because what I'm putting out there is helping them see the other side. In terms of a winner, right, it's, again, that comes back to what you see as success. Somebody might say, well, success to me is having my mortgage paid off when I'm young, having security behind me and the ability to support my family if anything goes wrong. And then somebody else might define that success as pure aggression and the scale of the success that you have. And so it's very different. There's nothing wrong with being cautious, and I think everybody should be cautious, especially when you're dealing with investments that can fluctuate in value and go up and down. And one misconception is that the question that I always get asked is, what happens if I lose all my money? That's a big question, which, because we've got cryptocurrency and all these other, get rich quick painted things, even though cryptocurrency can make a lot of people wealthy, they are so far down the line in terms of risk that people should be taking. And fast money just isn't possible, and that's investing itself. Whenever I explain it to people, it's boring. The more boring it is, the better it's going to do, because it shouldn't be something that thrills you. There's not supposed to be any emotion attached to it. It's plan and execute. That's it. And getting emotional over money in that way is never going to work out well, because the more emotional you get, the more chance of human error, right? Which is mad. It's mad, and that's why people use somebody like me, because the context of human error gets removed, because they need to come to me first before they make any decisions. And so risk itself, I think that if you have no experience with it, right, there's no way that you should be being aggressive. Bottom line, you need to step into those shoes over time. And what I've been doing with clients of mine is small amounts, come at it, get comfortable, wade into what you're trying to achieve first, up to the hips, so that you get a feeling. If you wade under the water, you get a feeling for how cold the water is, but eventually you'll get comfortable, and then you wade in a wee bit more and a wee bit more and a wee bit more, and then you can start to swim. You know what I mean? And so my approach, because I'm young as well, I'm not 50 or 60 years old, I'm trying to start at journeys for people.
How old are you?
29. I'm trying to start journeys for people where they can wade in when they're young, preferably in their 20s, to be honest with you, or their early 30s. That's where I like to see people, because they've got so much time ahead of them, and the more time you have, the less risky you have to be. Whereas when you get older and you're trying to achieve something, you have to go all in and you have to pay more into these investments and pensions. But when you're younger, you can achieve the same thing with much less and let it work for you. You know what I mean? And that's what I need to get across to people more, is smaller operating smaller for longer periods of time will leave you in the same place as somebody who's 20 years later and is trying to achieve the same thing as you. And then that's when people get uncomfortable. So, you know, risk itself is a weird thing because attitude to risk comes from sort of like a lack of understanding and a lack of proof, right? And traditional financial markets for over 100 years have proved net positive returns over 10 decades, right, or more. Obviously, there's blips along the way. You've got wars and Great Depressions and things like that, but they are necessary. They are necessary because see if investments went up every single year by the same amount, then everyone would be doing it, and it wouldn't provide the same results. And so you have to take the good with the bad and understand that yes, there will be periods where things get worse, but the outcome is that it's likely that it's going to get better, and that we're going to end up further or have more progress by the time we get further on down the line. And that can be applied to anything. You know, you do 7 years of school. You start at a high probably because it's a new thing, and then you go down through your lows if you're struggling with your grades or you're not doing, you know, socializing or whatever. But then you come back up again and you come back down again. But when you do that 7 years of school, you are not the same person as you were 7 years ago, and that's exactly the same thing as investing. You know, it will go up and down, and it's guaranteed, and that is a guarantee. It will go up and down. Sometimes it might go down below what you've invested. You might be in a negative, but historically the markets have proved that they are probable, that they can provide probable growth, predictable growth in a safe way. And that's why I am where I am, because I leverage that probability. And that's why time is an important factor to me and my clients, because I know that statistically over a 30-year period, no matter what happens in between, you're probably going to do all right within a certain boundary. And that makes me much more confident in dealing with people in that way, instead of somebody who's going, I've got 10 years here, I need to make this money, work hard. I would shy away from that, and I'd probably decline to do that, to be honest with you, because that's putting me at risk as well.
So you're thinking long term, like
long term.
How long?
Well, you have as I say, you have different products for different periods of time, but you know, managing your money is a lifelong commitment. It's not, I'm going to do this for 5 years and then that's me.
Would it be, so I've come across people who think having a lot of cash is the best thing that they can have.
Disaster.
Why is that?
Well, again, historically, we've got inflation, and inflation is basically the rise in costs of certain things every year. And so the retail price index is what inflation is. It's basically based on a basket of goods, or the CPI. I can't remember which one it is, excuse me. And that's basically if you go out and get bread, milk, eggs, chocolate or whatever in the shop and it costs you £10 this year, next year it's going to cost you £12. The year after that it's going to cost you £14.20 or whatever it may be. And so if you keep your money in the bank or under the mattress, you're basically being left behind as the cost and life moves on, and and money moves on. And that's why people need to get their money to work for them. They at least keep pace with inflation, so that 10 grand car that they were going to buy this year, if it's 12 grand next year, that their money has still grown in order to meet that need. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So what, even if they had like say 10,000, just put it into an index investment?
That's
or like what could they do with it?
So if you have your emergency funds should stay in the bank, right? And that's where you have to leverage interest rates from the bank, which will be, you know, the interest rates are high at the moment. You can get 5% interest on your savings. So if you have 10 grand in savings, because you need it and these savings are supposed to cover you for in the short term, which is over a 5-year period. If you need money for anything, you can get 5% in 10 grand, which is 500 quid. And so if you kept that 10 grand in an envelope under the bed, you've just lost out in 500 quid. And so you need to make use of what's out there in order to make your money work in some way or form, even knowing that inflation might be eating away at it a wee bit. You know, inflation at the moment, as of maybe a week ago, was 6.7%, but you can get 5 or 6% in the bank on interest at the moment, or through something like a cash ISA or whatever it may be, right? And if you want me to give you the specific products, I can, but that means that instead of you losing 6.7% of your money, you're only losing 1.7 if you're getting 5% interest. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to, in some ways, it's just staying with the times. And you go through periods where interest rates are higher and you make more money on your savings, and when they're lower and you don't. And then that correlates with our conviction when people should be investing money. Because, for example, I've had several occasions in the last 6 months where people have come to me with 100 grand in the bank or 200 grand in the bank or even more and said, should I invest this money? And I've said no, because you can guarantee yourself 5% in the bank until the interest rates go away again. In the short term.
Yeah.
So if somebody says to me, I've got 100 grand and I am going to need this money in 3 years for X, Y, and Z reason, number one, you shouldn't be investing it, because investments are 5 year plus, right? No investment should be any less than 5 years or more. And they need access to that money. So if that was my money, do you think I would be investing it? You know, I have to treat their money as my own, and they can guarantee themselves 5% growth or 5 grand a year on 100 grand for 3 years. And you have the ability to do that. You can guarantee yourself that by fixing your savings. You can lock them away for 3 years. So you come back out the RMA 115 grand, and then the interest rates fall, so it's not as attractive anymore, and then we invest the money. Mm-hmm. So we're always leveraging what's best at the time, right? And that's in the short term. And if it's looking down the line where people say, I want to put this money away and I don't want to access it for 10 years or more, then it's unlikely our interest rates will ever remain where they are now, because they're the highest they've been in 15 years, only because they're trying to kill inflation. And when that is on their wraps, they'll start to bring the interest rates back down, and then saving in the bank becomes less attractive. So in the shorter term, the interest rates are good for cash savings, but if you're going longer term, then investments will probably outperform savings. So again, you know, you're sitting with that subjectivity again, but in my eyes, if you've got 10 grand and that's your safety net, should sit in the bank, accrue interest, put it in the best bank account that you can get the best interest on, and let it do that. You have to take that one on the chin, because if you invest that money and then a year later you need some of it, they sort something out and it's worth 10% less than it was the year before, then you've lost both ways. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's always the here and now with objectives, and then with a spice of what could happen in the future as well. Yeah. And that's why it turns to be a case by case basis. Yeah.
So everyone's treated differently in the sense based on their needs when they come to you. Mm. How do you stay up to date with, you know, because as a society we're always evolving. Mm-hmm. So I would imagine that, I'm sure everything, there's the general base of things are still the same, but there must be some maybe new things come in, new investments, or is that something, or like how do you keep your people, you know, your clients up to date, or how what is your relationship like with them, with the moving markets like?
Well, we the structure that we have in place, because I don't work for a small independent firm, I represent a much larger firm, and so a lot of the market commentary is what it would be called, or market insights, are passed to us from people who are employed full time. They watch it. So we get given the information that is most important to us, right, depending on the markets. And over time, you begin to get a perception of how markets move, because you're watching them every day, right? And you understand when the markets might be high or the markets might be low. And then that can then translate into how you advise people. And to give you a good example, COVID, or the pandemic, during previous to that, from 2008 when the financial crash happened around the world, and done devastation, obviously, in the UK and America. Over the next 12 years until 2020, the markets were providing serious growth, you know, very respectable, positive growth, property markets and financial markets, right? Whenever COVID happened, the markets knee-jerk fell probably by about 35% across the board. And so from my perspective, I've been in wealth management for near 7 years. And so I've been experiencing all these big major world events that other people, you know, haven't experienced, because they're in a period of time where these don't happen. And you learn, you get a gut feeling sometimes, right? And so keeping people up to date with markets obviously depends on your own knowledge and your own education, continually educating yourself and so on and so forth, but also keeping an eye. And because we are traditional wealth management, you know, wealth managers, we use traditional markets, and traditional markets have got long histories of data behind them, which helps people, predict and analyze them so that they can see what's going to happen in the future. And one of the reasons why I am with or represent the firm that I represent is because everything that they do is forward looking. It's not based on the past. And so there's many financial planners out there that will base investment decisions based on past performance or previous performance. So say, for example, that restaurant has done really well for the last 10 years, so we're going to buy it because it has done, and hope that it continues to do better, continues to work on that basis. But that's not always going to be the case. You might buy a restaurant in the year that something major happens, like 2020, and the market's and it falls to pieces. Whereas we look at it in terms of what's doing well now and what do we see is going to do well in the future, factoring in the probability of how macroeconomics is going to affect the financial markets. And that could be the effect of a war on the markets. How is that going to affect the markets? Is that going to have a devastating effect on a certain type of asset? Does that mean that we need to be more conscious about how much of that asset we're using? And that's not that's things that I've learned, but I don't make those decisions. There's people way, way, way up in the sky who their career has been analysing these situations, and portfolio and fund management, you call it, and their job is to come up with these investments that statistically make sense, that they are going to provide an opportunity for people to grow money within a certain boundary of unexpectedness. And you call that basically, it's standard deviation. You can expect that something's going to generate, or a business will generate $100,000 a year, but you also have to account for a boundary of what happens if one year it does 80 grand and the next year it does 120. Exactly the same. So we're trying to predict something that's going to create a certain level of growth, expected growth, you call it, or expected return, but also factor in how much that can wiggle by over time, if you want to call it that. And so it all becomes, it's a fine art really, and it's not, these decisions are not taken lightly. There's a lot of research, there's millions of pounds spent on it every year. And so whenever somebody says, what happens if I lose all my money? That's the exact answer I'm going to give them. And when it comes to somebody who says, I want to do this on my own, and I says, well, you can do it on your own, but you're not going to stand up against the resources that we have. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so, for example, there will always be a big topic of conversation around do-it-yourself investments using index funds, right? Which are passive investment funds that nobody controls. They just are what they are, like the S&P 500, and using somebody like us. So the S&P 500 is passive investment management, whereas we are active investment management, and that means that there's people actively managing the investments and what's held within them at all times. And so the S&P has previously provided great returns on paper. It has provided 10% or more in terms of growth every year for 35 years or 40 years. But it's what happens in between that is it might have provided 15% growth in one year, but it might have fallen by 20% in the same year. And so that level of discomfort is very difficult for a lot of people to withstand, especially when you get on the bigger figures. Like if we've invested £1 million for somebody and we say to them, this could make you 200 grand, just hypothetically, if it went up by 20%, but there's also a chance it could go down by 30. Are you willing to go from 1 million down to 700 up to 1.2? A lot of people are going to say no. They want to see slow and steady, comfortable, predictable, and that's something that differentiates do-it-yourself investing and using professionals, because it's a different story when it comes to your life savings versus a couple £100 that you throw on an investment account.
Yeah. Can you give me some example of a client that has come to you who maybe was like who was afraid, stuck, unsure, but they started to earn money and they really wanted to do something about it, and you've guided them down the path?
Well, a very good example that you can use for that is people who work in the trades, especially people who are they give you a real world example working cross border, electricians, welders, pipe fitters who are from here or from the north, but they're working in the Republic because the earnings are a lot better. And then people will go from doing a 4-year apprenticeship earning pittance, they make an 80 grand a year depending on what they're doing, And so then people will have real apprehension about, I made all this money and I don't want to spend it. And then they're like, I know I need to do something with it, but if I don't understand it, then it's very difficult for me to pull the trigger on something. And so in that case, it's my job first and foremost to help them get into that mindset where this is good for them, with another layer of the fact that I can prove that I am credible, reputable, I've done it before, I know what I'm doing, I'm qualified to do it, and I represent one of the major players and the industry in our country. And so you're trying to provide as much comfort and security to that person so that they can make that first step. And then you spice that up with starting somewhere conservative so that they can get comfortable themselves, really loving it, using something like an ISA, because an ISA is accessible. And if they get uncomfortable after a period of time, whether it's made money or not, they can still get their money back out and they can say, nah, it's not for me, which never really happens. 9 times out of 10 it doesn't happen. The odd time it does. And so you have to get them into the mindset that they have to use the position that they're in, and they would be doing themselves a disservice if they didn't do this, because that's essentially what they're doing. Because I'm sure people who look back in their life and say, I earned all this money and I did diddly squat with it, which a lot of people probably can relate to.
They've earned. I know people that have earned money and they have a lot of cash, but they've been scared to do something with it.
Well, that's where again, as I say, you have to provide the credibility and show people that you've done it before. And in terms of giving examples, you can't pin it down on one person. And the way that I like to place it is, well, let's try do, and it's no different than somebody who has long hair and you go, instead of you shaving your head today, just cut a wee bit off, then cut another wee bit off. Same thing applies. You have to be patient with people too and understand that this is a brand new thing for them, and not make assumptions that they are psychologically ready to do this. Because some people need more time than others, some people need less, and so that's where you would place people and say, start conservative, but know that I am going to start pushing the boundaries over time with you. And then they are much more comfortable with that because the commitment is small. They can get comfortable with the fact of that money will fluctuate on a day-to-day basis if they've never done that before. And once they know then that it's not as bad as they really thought it was going to be, then they can start committing a wee bit more and get to a point where then they can create that plan that we talked about, where if I do X with X amount for X amount of years, forecasting some growth, here's what it could be left with in 10 years, 15 years or whatever, and then it all clicks and you're happy as Larry. Mm-hmm. But it's, I can't expect people to jump right into that with 2 feet, because I've been working in the industry for years, and I have to build up a certain level of confidence and conviction too, which takes time. And I would never give somebody a recommendation that I was uncomfortable with either, and that's really important. So you learn to be detached from people. You emotionally detach yourself from numbers, because numbers become a part of everyday dealings, but all the emotions that come along with it and understanding them from a person's point of view are still there. So you have to say, this is the best thing for your money, regardless of what I think or you think. This on paper is the best thing for tax and for growth and for risk and all that sort of stuff. And then you have to try and apply that to that person's personality. Mm-hmm. And it's mad. It is crazy, because it really, it's a part of what I do that I don't. It's not really talked about that much, and that's why you will find people that say they're a good financial planner, they're good at financial advice, because they're not just going in with a spear and just shoving it right in. They're trying to build people up, because it's a bit like people who won the lotto. If you have £1 million and you've never had it before, probability wise, you're probably going to lose it all. Yep. And we see that in the news all the time.
Yep.
But if then people accumulate that money over time, learn, become the person, step into the shoes, and understand why they're doing it, then the probability of success is so much higher. Mm-hmm. Which is it's nice. It's good for them and it's good for me, because it's not all about investment growth. It's about seeing people's lives change, and going along on the journey with them.
You're doing, a lot of work I see on social media. You know, you do posts, you have quite a good following. You're putting information out there. Like, why do you do that?
Well, again, just coming right back to what I just said, building people up. You know, there was a massive gap for a long time in terms of financial knowledge, and obviously Martin Lewis, who's one of the most popular people who educates people around the UK, has become, you know, a household name for a lot of people. And so, you know, in a sense of you're managing your day-to-day money, and not as such investments and things, because he's not licensed to do that. But in terms of putting out content on social media, it's just a widen perspective. Tell people what's out there. Let them do what they want with the information. You know, if somebody gives me information about buying a home, this area and that area, here's all the information you need to know about them both. You go and decide then.
Yeah.
You know, I'm giving out the information so people can make those choices. You know, they might turn out good or they might turn out bad if they decide whatever. But that's what it's all about, opening doors. And just, you know, financial literacy is a massive topic at the minute, because everybody knocks on about why we aren't taught this stuff in school. And I'm sort of trying to take that with a pinch of salt and go, I've had 5 years dealing with people, dealing with millions of pounds, umpteen different circumstances, people with different jobs, careers, employment statuses, running businesses, male, female, with children, all these types of things. Why would I not just sprinkle a wee bit of that out there that I think that people can get use of, and save them having to go and pay somebody 500 quid to tell them?
Yep.
You know what I mean? And that is valuable information. You know what I mean? It's really valuable information, especially when you add perspective from somebody who's walked the line. And then you can, like, I can say a pension is for your long-term future, which is a fact. It's a statement. But because of what I've achieved or what I've, you know, experienced myself, I can span that out into something much more different that appeals to a person, not just their wallet. You know what I mean? Which comes along with comfort and security and, you know, independence and freedom and all the things that we talked about. Even if it's on a smaller scale or a bigger scale, that doesn't matter. It's still about those things. So that's why I do it.
Yeah.
And ultimately, you know, without sounding too selfless, it brings me business, and people come to deal with me as a result of it, because they can see that I'm trustworthy, that I'm willing to give something before I get something back, instead of going, I want this from you and then I'm going to give back to you. It's, look what I've given you. You know what, you could write a course on it, or you could teach it in schools, and people would come out knowing a lot more. And so people naturally will say, I know he knows what he's talking about, he's trustworthy, he's been doing this for a while, he's been consistent, he's been around a while, you know, all these things. And then that gives them the confidence to take the step and reach out to somebody like me.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. It's amazing. I'm very grateful for it, honestly.
Well, look, you put in the work. You know, if you put in the work, you're trying to help people, and you're doing it for free as well. Something good will come of it. I'm sure, and our good is already coming from it. You know, a question that's come to me is like, and people always say, well, money doesn't make you happy. Does money make you happy?
Yeah, I would say for like, at the end of the day, I'm not going to knock around here and say I'm a multi-millionaire. I'm not, you know, but you experience changes, and, you know, your outlooks as you accumulate some more money, which, you know, there's a lot to be said for people who accumulate a certain amount of money where they've drawn a line under it and said, you know, if anything ever goes wrong in my life, I'm sorted. I've got no debt. You know, when debt is a major factor in that, I've got no debt. I've got a couple $100,000 in a pension. I've got 50 grand in the bank, or 30 grand in the bank, or whatever. And I've got 50 grand or 60 grand in investments that I've accumulated over my whole life. You know, nothing's ever going to wobble you. So I wouldn't say that it makes you happy in terms of just having it, you know, emits happiness. But I think it removes a lot of the stress of life, which in turn can help you be more happy.
Yeah.
And do the things that you want to do with your life. And that's what we're trying to do. You know, it's a matter of, you know, if you saved your whole life, you know, you do all right out of the back of it, like you would. But, you know, at what extent will that serve you when you get to point B? And so we're just trying to help people give what they're doing a wee bit of a kick, you know, over time, in a safe way, so that it's actually benefiting them, and it's you know, satisfying them that they've worked hard and they've done something, and now that's working hard for them. So they're starting to get out of that cycle of trading time for money.
Yeah, so their money's working for them.
Exactly.
And that gives you freedom. So there is an element where, yeah, money's not going to give you full happiness, but it definitely gives you.
It encourages you to be more happy, I would say. You
Yeah.
know? And if you think about it at the very bottom level, you know, if you do buy your first house, right, and you've got your car and you're paying for it, you know, for a finance agreement or a personal loan or whatever, and then your boiler breaks and you don't have that $5,000 in the bank to replace your boiler, that's not going to encourage happiness. But if you've got 5, 10, 15 grand in the bank, it'll, excuse me for cursing, if you've got 5,
you
10,
don't need to speak.
if you've got that money in the bank, those things just bounce off you. And that, you know, there's a lot to be said for that, even at the lower level.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, that's the first layer, and then you scale it. And, you know, everybody has their own definition of what they want their life to be like. It's up to you to decide how much you want to scale those feelings. And that's when people end up becoming a millionaire, or being worth 10 million or 100 million or a billion or whatever you may say. So I don't think it brings happiness, but I think it puts you in a position where you can encourage more happiness. Do you know what I mean?
Yep. For me, I think like money, as you touched on earlier, like money's a tool, and it can, whenever you get to a place that you have, you know, you're doing what you enjoy and the money's working for you, you can then go into where you're not, maybe not, you can do something for yourself or do something that you enjoy doing rather than working for someone else, and be in your own space, your own freedom, your own creativity to do the things that actually you really enjoy doing, you know. So if you don't have the money to do that, then yeah. So it's a touchy question, you know.
It's a deep question.
It is like, but yeah, it definitely, I'm not gonna say it buys you happiness, but it gives you the ability to bring more happiness into your life, I think, for me.
Well, you know, the middle ground there, as you say, is if you get to a point in your life where you know, I don't have to go to work tomorrow if I don't want to, but I'm going to go because I enjoy it. That's, you know, that is the best middle ground, because you are choosing to work. And that you would find that a lot of people, when they get to a point of like real, you know, true financial security, that they'll continue working anyway because they're trying to protect what they've built. And they're like, well, I don't mind going to work for 20 hours a week because it satisfies me. I get to speak to people. It meets all their needs emotionally and psychologically that I have. And I can earn some money from it, which supports my lifestyle. And then all the other stuff that I've created can either be for bigger things in my life or for intergenerational wealth. And then that's when you start going down that road of, you know, inheritances and all that stuff. And some people are legacies. Legacy wealth is what you call that.
Yeah.
And that can change, you know, a whole family tree's life for the next 50 generations if you be the person in your family that does that, which is crazy when you think about it.
Is money scarce or abundant? You know, is abundance, is it there or is it not? Or like wealth, how do you see that?
I definitely think that, you know, you can attract it into your life, obviously through choices. You know, there's different levels of attraction. You know, if you want to attract money into your life, you know that you might have a brutal few years of saving or accumulating money so you can make plans with it. But then with that comes more attraction and more abundance, because if you are in a position where you don't feel like you are that person who deserves to be in that position, then what's the point? It's not going to happen. You know, and that's where a good saying that I've heard before, I think it was actually one of my parents said, is you have to get out of your own way and let it happen. You know, if the door presents itself, and smash it, go straight through it, because, you know, that comes back to then limiting beliefs, which is another thing. Is, you know, if you come from a certain place, then you might have a limiting belief that you shouldn't be in that position like that, and you have to be the person who breaks that mold. If you're the first person in your family to do that, you know, it's a lot easier for somebody who comes from a place where life's been good. You know, they break through those doors because that's the standard of life that they're used to. But for somebody who hasn't come from that, you know, they have to work really hard. They really understand and believe that they deserve it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's all part of, that needs time as well, and that's why I like to see it happen over time, instead of saying to somebody, you know, if you do X, Y, and Z, you will then become rich. But it's more about, do you want to generate wealth, and do you want to have that in your life? But you can't get that unless you look for it. You have to look for it. It's not going to fall in your lap. Even people who won the lottery, they might have been buying the lottery tickets for 30 years, and they've tried to attract it in their life by buying lottery tickets. So it is abundant. It's money's everywhere, and the world is run by money. So if you want to have that, unless you're willing to go out there and live off the grid where money is irrelevant, then you need money. It's up to you to decide how much you want, and the outcomes that come from that. But you have to believe that it's there to be taken, and you have to go after it.
Yeah, like for me, money, it's an energy. It's just an exchange. And I truly believe that we are all worthy of abundance, money, wealth, however you like to call it. And I think for me, it's like, you just have to believe. It's a knowing, and you have to embody that feeling. And when you feel that way, I think that you start taking the steps. Now, it's not that it's going to come to you tomorrow, but it's that you're living knowing that it's going to come, and then every single day you're going to be taking the right step, the shorter step, and you every day you keep taking the shortest path there. It'll bring you to that place, and that's where you will attract abundance.
I agree with you, and I think that the very first point for anybody is they have to decide. They have to decide, do they want to attract it and be abundant or not, because it just doesn't happen for you for no reason. You have to make that a choice, and it's a weird thing to say that, because obviously people have their own environments and their own starting point, but everybody can build from a certain starting point, and that's why I think it's getting wealthy is grand. People want to be wealthy, yeah, but I think that the way that it happens, is a lot more beneficial for people. The journey that they go on, because they become different people, and that's why the come up stories of people who went from rags to riches are so good, because they feel good. They make people feel good. But that's it's everybody can do it. You're right. I agree with you. And that's why people like me are here. They try and help people just get on the path, and then see what happens from there.
Yep. Having this conversation makes me want to have another conversation with you, Orann.
Thank you. That's lovely. That's a good comment.
We'll have to set another date. It'd be good to catch up again, and I could see you're a very insightful guy to managing and becoming financially secure. So I'm very grateful for that.
You're very welcome. It was a great experience.
Yeah.
And we'll have good chats. Don't you worry about it.
I'm sure it will. If you had 3 tips now for someone, just three pointers for people who just wanted to start out, it could be anything. What would they be? 3
good pointers. First one is, get aware of your circumstances to the penny. Understand what you're earning and what you're spending and how you're spending it. And number 2 will be, sacrifice in some cases can be good for you, and sometimes if you don't sacrifice whatever you're doing and not sacrificing, it's just not worth it. Even if it's a pair of shoes or a night out, sometimes it's just not worth it. You'll get more out of that bit of sacrifice than you really think over the long term. And the third one is, open your mind and think bigger. Think big. Think bigger about what you're trying to do, because if you fall short of a big goal, then you've still went a lot further than if you had a small one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's purely just from a personal point of view.
Yep.
That's outside of actual money planning. That would be three good pointers, unless you want some money planning ones.
No, that's perfect there. I think
No
it's
bother.
a great start. That's the saying, reach for the stars and land on the clouds.
That's it.
Orann, thank you very much. It's been
My
an
pleasure.
absolute pleasure.
Thank you
I
very
thoroughly
much.
enjoyed the conversation.
Cheers.
And
Thank you.
we will be in touch again.
100%.
Good man, sir.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening. I thoroughly enjoyed that conversation, and as you can see, Orann is very invested in helping people become financially secure, putting their money into a property, whatever it is, so that you can become more stable and enjoy a more abundant life. So again, I hope you enjoyed this conversation, and I ask you to remember that you are the infinite creator.